All right, let's get to some of the new head coaching hires, though. Let's get to all of them, actually, and grade how we saw them go down. If you want to go check out Will Brinson's grade, they're over on CBSSports.com. He graded all of them, gave a full write-up for that. But we're going to go through and do it ourselves. Start with the Bears. Ben Johnson. You can kick this one off. I'll give the floor's yours. Ben Johnson, how do you give this a grade for this one?
Well, you got to look at it with you got to have some different perspective. You got to zoom out a little bit because you have to take into account all the hirings that the Bears have made. Since I became a Chicago Bear in the 2013 draft, they had just had, I believe, a 10-win and a playoff season with Lovie Smith. And they got rid of Lovie Smith. They hired Mark Trestman. Mark Trestman, pretty good year one, lost to the Packers in that last week. And then obviously the next year, terrible. John Fox becomes the coach, not much better. Matt Nagy becomes the coach, flash in the pan. We win the NFC North in his first year, coach of the year. We think we're going to have something to build on. Big letdown the following year. Obviously, some front office decisions led to some of those seasons, some injuries as well. But then they bring in Matt Eberflus, and we're going to change it up. We're going to bring in a real culture guy, a defensive guy, somebody who can carve his own path as a head coach. That doesn't work out. Situational awareness, all of it comes into play. Game management, the Bears fire him. Now you have an opportunity to right the ship because all of those hires were guys that had question marks around them. All of those hires weren't home runs. They weren't the number one guy that you want to go get. The Chicago Bears went and got the number one guy. They've got the number one pick in Caleb Williams entering his second year. They've got a bevy of skilled players that he can work with in that offense. They need somebody to best utilize that offense and get them started on the cutting edge offensively. I'm going to give the Chicago Bears a hard A+ here because I just think it's an absolute home run. You know what? I'll be realistic. It's an A-. In a tough league, I'll give them an A-. But they are
that was an A+.
They're
I
in
thought
the
it
A's.
was.
But it's still the Bears. So you have to weigh into that it's still the Bears. But they got it right. They did the no-brainer. They made the layup, and that's all you can ask.
And here's why I think this one, I mean, compared to a lot of times when you hire like the offensive mind. So like when they hired Matt Nagy, he was an offensive mind below an offensive mind, right? Like he was, when everyone's hiring Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, the guys that have like been in the building with them, you don't know how much is necessarily the guy under the guy, right?
He was standing next to the chef in the kitchen, and when the chef was cooking Wagyu, he would cut him a couple pieces every once in a while and be like, check this shit out. It's pretty good.
You're hiring like a sous chef underneath a world-class chef. So you don't
know
if
can
that
be
sous
great.
Got it. Could be, but you don't know if he has it or not. With Ben Johnson, he was the master chef in the kitchen on that offense. You have no doubt that anything that happened there at Detroit offensively was Ben Johnson through and through in terms of schematically, like all that stuff. There's no worry about how he's going to game plan. He's done it at the highest level in the NFL for 2 years. So, or I guess 3 years now, but like the last 2 years were really his best. So that's why I think it's a great hire. There's no, will he have it? Will he not? It's just, can he have that building believing? It's going to be easy to believe when you're successful, you know? And also, I think we should look at this as like a whole staff as a whole. Obviously, Declan Doyle, no clue what that guy's going to be. Youngest OC in, I think, NFL history. But you know that Dennis Allen on the opposite side of the ball is a 2-time NFL head coach. He's the guy that can be a leader on that side of the ball. You at least have that voice in the building. So from that perspective, I give it an A+.
It seems to me like it's the same structure they had when Nagy had Fangio. But elevated. This is an elevated version of that because Dennis Allen has been a head coach. He understands the minutia of being the HC. And now he doesn't have to be the head coach, so he can help the head coach who is trying to learn how to run an organization, run the team. But to your point, the Dennis Allen hire is like the little sprinkle on top with the little maraschino cherry there for the Bears.
All right, let's get to the Raiders, where they hired Pete Carroll, OC Chip Kelly, DC Patrick Graham. What say you, Kyle?
First and foremost, I love the idea of having Pete Carroll back on an NFL sideline. I come from the era of watching Pete Carroll have the guys at USC showing up every single week and dominating. Obviously, he's a great recruiter, and there's some questions probably about how they obtained those recruits. But I'll say this. If you go and you talk to guys who played for Pete in Seattle, at Southern Cal, they all speak so highly of him. He's a player's coach. He was doing the player's coach training camp style before anybody else was. The guys are in shorts, they're in shells, they're not hitting, they're staying fresh. People love that stuff. They appreciate it as players and they respond well. I think that Las Vegas Raiders team is begging to have somebody who probably isn't as much of a hard ass as Antonio Pierce, although I would have responded well to the hard ass stuff from AP. Would have loved to have played for him or at least seen what he was about. But Pete Carroll, you know exactly what you're going to get. He's really bright. He's an offensive mind, and he's somebody that can get you on the right page as a roster with the right messaging. And you talked about Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was as dominant an offensive mind as there was in football for a few years. He brought it from the he brought it from New Hampshire to Oregon, and he got even better. He went from Oregon to Philadelphia, and year one, I would argue it got even better. Obviously, the league caught up. People started doing things defensively to take away some of his tendencies, and the offensive side of the ball, his stuff wasn't as rare. Other people were using it. He was a trendsetter. He went to college, won a national championship, had the opportunity to not be the head coach and find out, in my opinion, I haven't talked to him about this, but I would imagine it reignited his love for the game because he didn't want to have to deal with, going to the podium every week and being the guy that's asked a million questions and having a million items on his desk that he wants to go through. He wants to coach football. He wants to get your tight end in the best position to catch the football. He wants to get your left tackle to have his hat on the proper side on a toss crack. He wants your quarterback to be in rhythm and confident and play with, that level of preparation. I love the hires in Las Vegas. I'm going to give them a B+.
I love this one. This one, I couldn't believe they got the staff that they did because Pete Carroll is just a head coach. I think it's very good. It's a distinctly different vibe, right? You go from Josh McDaniels to Antonio Pierce to the complete opposite. I mean, those are hard-nosed sort of head coaches to about as player a coach gets. So I like this one. I think I'm going to go just straight A, considering where the Raiders were, who their options were. I thought they put together a great staff.
And they have Tom Brady too, which is pretty sick.
The interesting thing to note, though, Pete Carroll, I wonder if this played a factor. Two of his sons on staff now. One as the run game coordinator / offensive line, and one as the assistant quarterbacks coach. So maybe that had something to do with Pete wanting to come back.
They probably know
to
ball
the NFL.
pretty well. They probably.
I'm sure they do, but just something to note. All right, Patriots. Mike Vrabel as your head coach, Josh McDaniels as your OC, Terrell Smith as your defensive line coach. He comes over Terrell Williams comes over. Terrell Smith's the cornerback for the Bears. Terrell Williams comes over from Lions as their defensive line coach, comes over to be defense coordinator for the Patriots. How do you see this staff?
I'm going to give the grade off the jump. It's an A. Mike Vrabel, home run. The same thing we talked about having an elevated version of with Vic and Nagy having Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson. Everything they wanted with Gerard Mayo, they're getting at an elevated level with Mike Vrabel and a more experienced level with Mike Vrabel. I just think it's 100% not only a familiarity hire, but a culture hire and a legacy hire. This is such a Patriot. This is such a right move. I'm going to give it an A here. I think they have a stud at quarterback, and if they can tie the rest of that operation together and get guys playing hard and playing on the right page, playing smart, playing tough, this New England Patriots team can be much better next year.
I'm going to give it a B+. This one, I love Vrabel as a hire. I just don't think his coordinators are that exciting to me, especially Josh McDaniels on the offensive side of the ball. When you have a guy in Drake May that needs to be developed, and I just think is distinctly different stylistically than everything McDaniels has done over the course of his career. So for that reason, B+, but I think Vrabel as the head coach, obviously a slam dunk. Jets, Aaron Glenn. Offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand and defensive coordinator. Let me actually look this one up. I didn't have it written down. Go ahead. What do you think about the Jets? I'll look up the GC.
I'm gonna give it a B plus, and the only reason it's not an A is because you're talking
Steve
about
Wilks.
you're talking
Sorry.
about a team in the tri-state area. You know, any of these teams, Giants, Jets. I mean, obviously, Aaron Glenn is a guy with a rich history in this building, and guys have a lot of respect for him. And we saw what his defense was able to do last year, even in situations where they were outgunned, outmanned. And they played hard. They played fast. They played smart. And they gave their team an opportunity to win, albeit it wasn't as dominant as the group of defenders we saw at the beginning of the season with the Lions. The culture with the Jets is at its best when they're playing hard-nosed defensive football and they're playing mistake-free on the offensive side. One of the first things he did was indicate that they're going to go in a different direction with their quarterback position. And I think that is a really good step in the right direction for the Jets. Not that Aaron Rodgers couldn't get the job done, but he understands that being in New York, being in that media base, you're going to need as little distractions as you can have, especially when you're trying to build something. And along with Aaron Rodgers, as you and I know, there comes a lot of other microphones and cameras and opinions and takes. He doesn't want that. I appreciate that. I'm going to go B plus for Aaron Glenn and the Jets.
I'm going to go A minus because I think nabbing Tanner Engstrand from the Detroit Lions, the guy who many thought they groomed to be the new heir apparent as OC, obviously they went elsewhere in that regard, but if you could bring over any of that magic that they had if he had learned anything from Ben Johnson, it's going to be such a far cry from what they've had offensive coordinator of late that that alone makes it an A minus in my opinion. All right, let's get to Liam Cohen and the Jacksonville Jaguars. His staff, OC Grant Udinsky, comes over from the Minnesota Vikings. He was their assistant QB coach. Anthony Campanelli comes over, was the linebacker coach from the Green Bay Packers, and then obviously Liam Cohen, the OC for the Tampa Bay Bucks. What do you got for this one?
I'm going to give it a B plus, and the only reason it's not an A is because of the way that it happened. And I feel like his staff could have been even better, and if they'd done it in a cordial fashion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, Liam Cohen's a really good offensive coordinator. We raved about him all year. The way that they were able to change not only their run game throughout the course of the year to fit some of the things that their offensive linemen were excelling at. I was talking to Tristan Wirfs about this the other day. He just was like, you do that well, we're going to do that. I'm not one of those coaches that's trying to fit, a square peg in a round hole. That's just not how it's going to work with Liam Cohen. And when you got a guy like Trevor Lawrence and you got a program that's begging to be good, when you've got an owner like Shad Khan, you're going to want to have the best product out front of you. And you got to match your strengths with people that can bring out the best in those strengths. And I think Liam Cohen is just that. We obviously love some of the young pieces they have out on the edge offensively. I'm going to go with a B plus here.
I'm going to go A plus with this one. I think him and Ben Johnson were two of, and again, for the same reason, you knew what he did in Tampa Bay was him. And it was some of the most impressive scheming I've seen for a first-year OC in some time. So for that reason, when a guy has it and you're pairing him with quarterback Trevor Lawrence, it's the same rationale for the Bears. It's just they haven't had the guy in forever as the head coach or as the that offensive mind that's actually giving you a leg up week in and week out. Now they do. For that reason, A plus. All right, Dallas Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer, your new head coach, offensive coordinator. Clayton Adams comes over as the O-line coach from Arizona. And then Matt Eberflus is your DC, obviously coming over from the head coaching position of the Chicago Bears. What are you going to give this one?
Look, as somebody with a last name that people know, and not because of me, I have a soft spot for a guy in the National Football League getting an opportunity to be a head coach. And Brian Schottenheimer is getting that opportunity. But I'm going to give it a B minus because of the fact that they probably could have hired someone else. They probably should have extended Mike McCarthy, and they didn't. And they invited all the scrutiny that comes along with hiring a first-time guy in Brian Schottenheimer. But back to my initial point, I am rooting for Brian Schottenheimer. He knows this team. He knows the roster. He knows the guys in the building. They have his trust. We've all been on if you've played in college, in high school, in the NFL, there's always a coach on the staff that you deem to be really smart and you have respect for outside of the head coach. And you're like, man, that guy could probably be a coach. I would imagine that there's a lot of guys in that building who feel like Brian Schottenheimer could have been a head coach, and now he gets that opportunity. The only thing that pisses me off is we missed the boat on a potential Deion Sanders head coached Dallas Cowboys. And you want to put asses in seats, Jerry? You want to make money? You want Jerry's world to become Jerry's universe? I think you missed the boat on that. But Brian Schottenheimer could well become a good coach. I think him having that relationship within the building is huge. And I'm rooting for him because as a guy with a last name like mine, I can appreciate and empathize with some of the things that he's heard and seen over the last few weeks.
I'm going to give this one a little bit lower. And I'm going to give it a C. He's been offensive coordinator his first year as an offensive coordinator. Do you know what it was in the NFL? His first year as an OC in the NFL.
Terrible.
Now, I mean, like, what year was it, do you think?
It was like, I know he's been a coach for like 29 years.
2006. So he's Jets offensive coordinator for 2006, 2011. Not banner years for the Jets offense. Rams offensive coordinator from 2012 to 2014. Seahawks offensive coordinator from 2018 to 2020. And then obviously the Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator for the last 2 years. If you have that big of a track record as OC and that lackluster a track record as OC, in my opinion, it's difficult for me to get that excited about it. And to me, it just feels like, from the Cowboys' perspective, a cost-saving move. It feels like they just didn't want to pay Mike McCarthy anymore. So let's take his OC. There was no feasible reason, nothing to point to that's like, yeah, we wanted Shoddy over McCarthy. It just,
no,
I don't know.
No, yeah,
you know?
You're right.
So all that said, that one's got to get my lowest grade of any of the head coaching hires. Last one, we can be quick on this because we don't know the full staff yet. But Kellen Moore just happened this week to the New Orleans Saints. What's your initial grade on this? Obviously, still no OC there. I believe DC is entailed. Joe Woods is going to be their DC. What do you got?
I'm going to give it a B for a few reasons. Number one, the guy played the game. He's a quarterback. There's not many of those guys on the planet. So that gives us a benefit if I'm the Saints. Number two, you have a Saints team that's not ready to win now. There's no secret about that. The way that they're structured contractually, they have a lot of things that are going to work themselves out in probably 3 years, right? 3 years. Is that what you think the timeline is to have success in New Orleans?
Yeah.
Well, you get an opportunity to work through some of those kinks as a head coach early and often, I would imagine, in New Orleans. You get to build your program with a guy, instill a culture, grow an identity down there in New Orleans while we're working out all the dollars and cents that go along with being in the National Football League. Kellen Moore can grow with this roster that he's going to be building. I'll give it a B.
Yeah, I actually lied. Joe Woods not going to be there. He joined the Raiders staff. Their website not updated to date. They have no OC, no DC, so just Kellen Moore in tow. I don't hate it. I think that for where you were not going to get any of the top guys. And so to get a guy who just won the Super Bowl as an offense coordinator, obviously just had a record-breaking offense from a rushing perspective. How much was he a part of that? Hard to say.
Can he bring the O-line? Can he bring Saquon?
Yeah,
can he bring Jalen for the tush push? Can he bring A.J. Brown for one-on-one, man-to-man situations? Can he bring Devontae Smith for the underneath stuff? Where's Dallas Goedert in all this?
Not coming with. So from that perspective, B. It's hard to really say. And like you said, it's a 3-year rebuild. So he's a guy that can maybe see you through that process.